Hi guys, happy new financial year. I'm Avi from Bass & More, and I want to have a chat to you about the importance of clean numbers. I deal with quite a few companies, and I get asked quite often, what is important to grow a business? And I guess the fundamental aspect of a business are numbers. Because how do you know where you're going to take the business if you have no idea what's happening within it? For example, one of the key elements that I'm going to discuss today is gross profit rate. Without the right numbers to begin with, how are you going to calculate that? And regarding the gross profit rate, it's very important to measure it at any given point, because how do you know if you're profitable? Or how do you know if any of the products that you sell or services that you do, you're making a profit on them? So without measuring them, it's impossible to tell. I had a situation once where one of the people that approached me asked for help. It turned out that they were doing quite well, and they actually managed to hit the kind of nail on the head, and the sales have turnover almost doubled. The problem was they were not making any money. Even though they were making more sales, there was less money in the bank. We did a little bit of investigating. It turns out that there was an error with one of the products that they were selling. There was a typo in the price. So the sales price, every time they sold that item, they lost money on it. And the only way we could find that out is we measured the gross profit before and after, and identified that one of the products was like the gross profit lowered. So by identifying that, we kind of narrowed the problem. And then by splitting the items, by individually splitting the items, we managed to find out that one of the items has significantly dropped in profitability with increase in sales. So it's very important to constantly measure, how you're going gross profit wise. Another very important aspect of running a business would be the projections or budgets, as they know. How do you know where you're going with the business if you have no idea where you want to take it? I mean, some businesses, some business owners run the business by the bank account, which is great if you have plenty of surplus cash, but it's not the best way to go about it. The most important aspect of a business is the cash flow, and it is important to know when and how the money is going to come in. And even if in some months the business could be less profitable or even not profitable than in other months, it is fine if it's planned out and measured. So which means if further down the track you're profitable, you know exactly what's going on, and you can allocate funds for those months to cover those months. So it is vital to have budgets in place and measure against them. Also very important, because there are people that put budgets together and set and forget, so to speak. They set them in place and forget they ever existed and keep going the way they were. So after you do put a budget together, it is very important that you measure against it and see how you're cruising, because actual versus budget, it's rarely that it ends up being identical. Quite often there are discrepancies, and it's good to identify those discrepancies and see what the business actually is doing and adjust the business model slightly whenever you need to, or even pivot the business to make sure that it's going in the right direction. Another very important aspect of business growth is KPIs for the employees. Look, hopefully all of you have absolutely amazing people working for you, and they're doing an amazing job. But how do you know if they are or they're not? How do you measure what the employees are doing? The ideas of KPIs is not so much to measure the employees themselves if they're good or bad. The idea is to set goals. Each employee, they might have their own strengths and weaknesses, as all of us do. And sometimes when you identify those strengths, you can bank on them. You can utilize those strengths to help and move it forward. And sometimes when they have a weakness, you can, like, once you identify that, you can upskill them, because every single person wants to do the best they can. And sometimes when there is a need for them to perform a task which they're not so great at, they might be a bit reluctant to mention anything special to the boss or the manager that's not what they're great at. But having KPIs in place, sometimes you can identify those areas, and you can have a chat, and you can upskill a person to be a much more productive team member, and grow them in the company, which is very important. And I guess it's a win-win situation from both sides. But as I said, unless you have those markers in place, unless you have those KPIs in place, it is impossible to measure it. So it's very important to find a way and measure the KPIs for your employees. And as I mentioned before, the cash flow comparison. Having a budget is great, but unless you're constantly reviewing what's happening in the business, unless you're constantly having a finger on the pulse, and making adjustments as you're going along, it's useless. And sooner or later, unless you're measuring those tags, so to speak, the business will go totally out of control, and you will not you will be running the business will be running you, which is a very scary proposition, trying to chase your tail in a business. And I guess also what I wanted to mention is the importance of inaction. By not doing anything about the situation that you know that you're in, and all of us have areas that need improvement, the inaction costs a lot. Sometimes it can even cost the business. And it's very important to identify that, and even if some things are not so easy and simple, it's important to do something about them and get professional help if need be. So if you have any questions, or if you want to discuss any of the topics that I've mentioned today, or need a hand with any of the parts, please let me know.